Welcome back, viewers. You're watching NewsX and I'm Vaishali Kohli. Now, in a world still grappling with energy volatility and geopolitical shocks, how did India steer through the recent oil crisis? And what lies ahead on its ambitious journey to energy independence? From navigating supply shocks and price pressures to the roadmap for the oil and gas sector, the scaling challenges in city gas distribution, India is working to change its energy vision. Let's find out how India tackled the oil crisis with an expert. Joining me now on NewsX is Mr. Raj Kumar Dubey. He's a former director of BPCL. Mr. Dubey, welcome. And my first question to you is, now the current global energy crisis has once again exposed the risks of excessive dependence on imported crude oil. Do you believe this moment strengthens the case for India to accelerate its gas-based economy ambitions?
If you really ask me, our Prime Minister has talked about it and already given us a target long time back that we need to get into the gas-based economy and increase our current share from the gas share from 6 to 7%. From there, he wanted us to go for 15%. Now that is a target already given, and maybe anticipating these kinds of global uncertainties, because too much dependence on crude. Like today, we have 89 to 90% dependence on imported crude, and therefore it is very imperative for us to get into other sources. I'm not saying only gas. There are other sources of energy. So that one thing is that our energy security is maintained. Prices are one part. The other part is even energy security is a question today.
All right. My second question to you is that city gas distribution has expanded significantly across India in recent years. So how important is natural gas in reducing India's long-term exposure to oil price volatility?
Yeah, city gas distribution from 60 districts, we have not now come up to more than 600 districts are covered all over the country. But there are certain problems which are existing here. One is the capital expenditure which has to go into this city gas distribution infrastructure. And the second one is getting, that right of way to see that there are, quick approvals so that the gas pipelines are laid in the urban markets, at least to start with. So these two are some major issues. And the third issue comes up, that the consumer preference to shift from LPG to LNG. So these three constraints are currently, not helping us to expand it, exponentially, this your PNG distribution. So once we, and I think this crisis today can give a spur, so that the consumers will start preferring PNG because it's more reliable and it is cheaper, and especially the marginal cost of PNG connection will be much lesser than what we look at LPG.
Now, Mr. Dubey, one of the biggest concerns today is the affordability for consumers. Compared to liquid fuels, can CNG and PNG realistically offer long-term pricing stability in an increasingly volatile global energy environment?
See, CNG has, for transport sector, CNG already offers you around 40 to 50% less running cost than petrol. So it remains cheaper to, per kilometer when you compare with petrol. So I think it's very clear that we need to shift to CNG. Only thing is that there is a resistance towards conversion, from petrol to CNG, because that involves a capex. That involves a capex and an inertia of people already who have, who are running on petrol and diesel. So it's very important there. Yeah.
And Mr. Dubey, India, of course, has ambitious plans around expanding city gas coverage to a majority of the population. Now, what are the biggest challenges in scaling this infrastructure nationwide? Is it policy, capital, sourcing, or consumer adoption, according to you?
Yeah, you have mentioned all the three. So there is no policy issue here. It is only allocation of capex by the oil marketing companies. That is number one. And number two is getting quick approvals to lay the pipelines. So, and third is then comes up the consumer, awareness that the consumer would shift from currently from, LPG or other cooking fuels to PNG. These three are the constraints, which I think now two of them are been taken care of very easily. The customer is already seeing that PNG is a more reliable option, and maybe it's a cheaper option in the long term. And other thing is the approvals are now coming fast. Maybe the crisis has spurred the local authorities to get into this. And my suggestion would be to look the LNG and the PNG infrastructure should be considered as a national infrastructure. It's a strategic infrastructure, just like roads and railways and those kinds of things. It's as strategic as that. And once you give that status, things should go faster.
Now, Mr. Dubey, with geopolitical uncertainty impacting LNG prices globally, how secure is India's long-term natural gas sourcing strategy?
See, one thing is, LNG will not eliminate, getting to LNG will not eliminate, the volatility in the gas markets. But it will help you diversify the risks. That when the crude is, spiking high, there will be some stability in LNG, it's possible. So therefore, what we require today is having a portfolio of energies. Energy portfolio, just you have a mutual fund portfolio, where the large cap they don't do well, the mid caps do well, and sometimes the small caps. So similarly, how we would balance risk, a geopolitical risk as far as energy sources? We should have many energy sources. We should have a portfolio of energy, which includes CNG and PNG. And one big advantage of having PNG would be the infrastructure. Once it is laid, the marginal cost for the customer is very less, number one. Number two is that infrastructure can be used for injecting CBG, so that we can have CBG plants all over the place. Today we are looking at CBG plants only on such places where it is nearer, where we can inject the gas nearer the pipelines. Tomorrow we can have CBG at any place because we'll have pipelines infrastructure. So that would be one additional advantage. Third is, tomorrow if we have hydrogen works well, and because of the research going on in hydrogen, some blended hydrogen can also be, the pipelines can be used for blended hydrogen. So this is an additional advantage when we get into this PNG.
Right. Now, electric mobility is growing rapidly in urban India. Do you see EVs and gas-based mobility as competing technologies, or do they complement each other during India's energy transition?
See, as far as India is concerned, all these technologies, including crude, you're talking about PNG, we're talking about EVs, they're all complementing technologies, when we look at energy security part. Okay. And certainly your EVs are more, it will be more used in urban markets. Two-wheelers, three-wheelers, cars in the urban sector, because even we are yet to get into, stabilize that, charging infrastructure till that is made. But the CNG would be for the long-term heavy transport vehicles. That can be, used for those transport sector, which is obviously 25% of our energy market. So CNG would be used mostly there, and EVs would be in an urban market. So they would be, complementing each other.
All right. Now, of course, Mr. Dubey, India has, of course, been positioning itself as a future leader in green hydrogen. Now, compressed biogas and cleaner mobility solutions. Which of these sectors do you believe will see the fastest real-world scale-up over the next 5 years?
See, when you look at CNG, PNG, CBG, the technology for storing and transfer, it's already there at scale. So it's already there. All we need to is like I told earlier, that we need to pump in some capex and get some approvals and go ahead with this. But hydrogen, it's still on the nascent stage. It is not yet matured. So it requires a lot of some more R&D, especially in terms of storage and transmission. But one thing is very clear: if we are able to crack this hydrogen thing, we will be surplus in energy in this country. Because you use we got a surfeit of solar energy, and if we can use the solar energy to produce hydrogen, you can see there is no limit to the energy which we have. But we have to crack this, and that is where it's important that we put a lot of capex into this R&D, wherein we start looking at hydrogen as a next great game changer for us. Just like for example of the the nuclear guys have done. The thorium, we had used thorium. We are the second country in the world to use thorium because that suits us, and therefore hydrogen suits our country much more.
All right, Mr. Dubey. Now, domestic consumers often compare CNG, PNG, petrol and diesel prices very closely. Now, in a high crude price environment, how should consumers understand the difference between global LNG-linked pricing and government-regulated or administered fuel pricing mechanisms?
For most part, we have been linking our prices to international, crude prices, especially for petrol and diesel, and also for LNG. The advantage with LNG and PNG is we have substantial domestic production also. So, that balances out the price volatility to that extent. But when you look at crude, we have 88 to 89% imported crudes. Only 10 to 11% is domestically produced. So that our dependence is much higher, and therefore our control on the prices is much lower for that matter. And therefore it is important that we shift to a gas-based. That's why our PM was talking about shifting to gas-based economy to reduce this kind of loss of control actually, in terms of looking at the prices. So while we had gone in tandem with international prices for the most of the time for petrol and diesel, sometimes like if we see a quick spike, very deep, very big spike in prices, and if it is for a temporary period, then the OMCs may think in terms of dampening the prices and not letting it pass to the consumer. Right? Now this is okay for a short term, because once the price hikes there for a short term, in international markets, if you start hiking here, then there will be a very cumulative effect on other prices as well. And then those prices don't come down despite the crude prices coming down, because it's very difficult to bring those prices of all other things down. And therefore, it is a good strategy that we dampen the prices. And during a good times, we make some money also when the prices are low. That is why we don't go for quick increases, decrease in price also when the crude price decreases. So that is the dampening effect the company pays. But when it goes for a longer time, like it is happening now, so initially we thought it would be for 15 days, 20 days or 30 days. Now the war, it looks like this will continue. And even if the war doesn't continue, the supply sources have been hit in the Arab world. So we may not have the same amount of supply which was there before the war. And therefore, this situation may continue for a long time. High crude prices may continue. And therefore, it is important that we now start regulating the prices as far as the international prices are concerned. Of course, gradually.
Now, Mr. Dubey, I have two more questions with you, and which is that there is increasing debate around whether India should allow more market-linked fuel pricing or continue cushioning customers during global crisis. With your perspective, let me just ask you, how important is pricing realism for maintaining the financial health of India's energy companies and infrastructure investments?
See, it's a nice question. Right now, the OMCs must be incurring somewhere around 25 to 30,000 crores loss per month. Now, what happens is, if we don't have this price transparency, we don't link it to the international market. Now, these losses will continue, and what will happen is the capex plans will take a backseat. All our investment in infrastructure, in renewable energies, in hydrogen, in CNG, in PNG, they will take a backseat. And then this will create a vicious circle that more dependence will be there on the international crude. And therefore, somewhere this has to end. And if we bring in transparency in line with the international markets, at least we will not have the companies, especially the companies, will not have so much losses, and even the government can, implement or transfer resources for infrastructure and capex, which will be helping us in the long term. So there may be short-term discomfort, by increasing the prices, but it will have a long-term. It will stop the long-term distortion, and it will enable the country to go in for long-term solutions for this energy crisis.
Right, Mr. Dubey, and my final question to you is that looking ahead, what lessons should policymakers and consumers take away from the current global energy disruption about India's future energy mix and the importance of diversification?
See, when we look at energy security, there is no other way rather than diversification in the kind of fuels we use for energy. So crude, okay, then you have this PNG, LNG, and then EVs, the electricity, the solar, the wind, the nuclear, the hydro. Everything. We should have a portfolio of these energy sources. There is no other way. Okay. Only problem is it requires, capex infusion there. That is the only problem. So let us look at this crisis, this crisis as a point where we look, very deeply into this issue, and the lesson is simple, we have to reduce oil demand, we have to diversify into a portfolio of fuels, and build domestic capacity or acquire capacities elsewhere, the nascent capacities which are available elsewhere. So this is what I would suggest.
Mr. Dubey, thank you so much for answering all of those questions very patiently and comprehensively for us on NewsX. Thank you for joining me. And with that, viewers, it's time for a short commercial break. A lot more coming up on the other side. Stay with us.